Good afternoon, and I'm so honored to welcome all of you to the inauguration of the Sino-American Cooperative Organization Plaque at the Mount Soledad National Veterans Memorial. Please join me in recognizing our honored guest, Radioman First Class and SACO veteran Kenneth U. Brown, and U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant Walter Henry Travis Jr. If you gentlemen could start standing, and the rest of us will please rise for the presentation of the colors by the Mira Mesa Scout Troop 1212 and singing of the national anthem by musician second class Patrick Melton.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Ready, two. About face. Forward march.
Hello, I think you can sit down now. My name is Carolyn Arnold. I'm the proud daughter of Willard Inman. He served at Chungking in Happy Valley during World War II. I'm here to say the SACO prayer written by Bill Barty in 1996. It's on the back of your programs if you wish to follow along. Hello, God, it's us again. The boisterous ones called SACO men. We're here today to laugh and pray, to remember you aren't far away. We're older now, but with a bit more sense than years ago without recompense. We all stepped forward and yelled out, "Here!" in response to the call for volunteers. You made us part of Miles Navy, home port China, big boss Dai Li. You protected us, then brought us home, turned us loose and let us roam. But at that time, you waved your wand, and among us all, forged a bond. That half a century has not changed, even though our lives were rearranged. So at this time, we feel we must say thank you, God, for picking us, and thank you too for sharing fast to receive our mates whose time has passed. And if there ever comes a time the world goes nuts and you're in a bind, just remember that here below, SACO Tigers volunteered to go. And so this psalm we now will end. But prior to our big amen, to you, O God, we salute and bow. To you from SACO, a big ding hao. Amen, and thank you.
Good. Oh. All right. Our first speaker is Neil O'Connell, the Executive Director of the Mount Soledad National Veterans Memorial. Neil served for 34 years in the Marine Corps, and at the time of his retirement, he was the top enlisted Marine at Camp Pendleton Headquarter Group. Neil?
Thank you very much, Dan. Good morning, everybody. It is so good to see so many people here on this beautiful Thursday morning. We've got a breeze. We've got visitors from all over the country to this very special place, and we couldn't be more honored to host you. I want to personally thank you on behalf of the trustees, our staff, the fine ladies here, our docents, and the whole entire Mount Soledad team. Thank you for choosing to have a plaque placed here on these beautiful walls honoring our veterans. I'd like to take just a few minutes and share some history with you about this memorial. I won't go all the way back to 1954, I promise you. But I must start right here, because to my right is Congressman Duncan Hunter. Congressman Hunter was instrumental in getting the legislation through in the National Defense Authorization Act in 2016 for us to purchase this property. I want you to just pause for a second if you've understood what's here. This association owns this land. It is private property owned by the Mount Soledad Memorial Association. We couldn't be more honored to be the caretakers of these walls with these 5,500 plaques, this beautiful cross, this beacon of freedom that represents freedom and our constitutional values paid for by the men and women that adorn these walls. It's a very, very extreme privilege, and we take it serious. But to have you here, men from the greatest generations with their families, the greatest generation. In World War II, our nation rose to the challenge. In 2 theaters of operation, the SACO organization, not a lot of folks have heard of it before, but the great thing about it is, today, you're still as close and loyal and patriotic as you were when you stepped on that aircraft or that vessel to go abroad. And we thank you. Semper Fi, sir. Walt, thank you, sir, for being here. Thank you. You're sitting at the highest point within the city of San Diego. If I could go back a little bit here, and you think about this in about 1938-39, when this land was just nothing more than hills, there was actually a cross here. There's been a couple of different crosses. It was organized and built to be a war memorial in honor of veterans who came home from World War II in Korea. And it was just barren land. But just imagine to the south here, the 3rd Fleet, headquartered right here in San Diego Bay. Over on the island, you've got North Island with the Naval Air Corps. You've got to the south, our NSW organizations. It's just a remarkable location when it comes time to reflect on military power. Right here to the east, MCAS Miramar, old Camp Elliott, the home of the 5th Marine Division in World War II, from Scripps Ranch all the way to Santee. To the north, Camp Pendleton. But really, just before this, right over here at UCSD in the VA hospital, was old Camp Matthews and a rifle range. And of course, to the sea, to my back here, to the west, the beautiful Pacific, those submarine troughs, as they call them, protecting our coastline back in those days. It's quite remarkable that the families of our veterans elected to place this beautiful cross and memorial right here with this vista. and you think of what surrounds us. To me, that's very, very, very close, and I hope it conveys to convey the same to you. So at this point, just a real touch. 6 presidents are recognized here, 27 Medal of Honor recipients. We have veterans from every era, all the way back to the Revolutionary War. There is not one wall here that's just for the sailors or the Marines or the soldiers or the admirals or the SEALs or the what have you. It is an integration of mosaic of everybody's service. Literally, you could go over and look at the plaque next to President Reagan, and you're going to see a U.S. Marine Corps corporal. I kind of get a chuckle out of that because if you've ever seen the White House, there's always a Marine opening the hatch, saluting our Commander-in-Chief. But the point I'm trying to emphasize is, as you can see on these walls, you have this wonderful mosaic of history. And what goes with that are stories, wonderful stories. And that's what our mission is. We preserve and we honor the legacy of our veterans on a daily basis. We're supported by a wonderful community, and we have a dynamic team that is always looking for ways to enhance that mission and reach out to our community. But again, I'd like to just thank you all for being here, and Congressman, it is very special to have you with us today, and these 2 warriors from the SACO organization. Dan, thank you very much again for having us here, for you joining up with us and hosting your organization. I appreciate that, sir. Lynn, I think it's, would you like me to introduce Lynn? Okay. Thank you very much, Dan.
Okay, next up is Lynn Grabenstein, president of the SACO Association and a daughter of Richard I. Terpstra, an original SACO veteran.
Good afternoon. I would like to extend a warmest welcome to those in attendance here today. Thank you for gathering to witness the installation of a permanent tribute to SACO's contributions to the Allied World War II effort. My name is Lynn Terpstra Grabenstein, and I am more than proud to be the president of the Sino-American Cooperative Organization, simply known as SACO. SACO was a top-secret military operation in the Pacific Theater during World War II. Many people do not realize that China was an important ally of the United States during that time. SACO's official code name was Project Friendship, aptly named because it was forged by the mutual agreement of President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek. It was an amazing military achievement, made possible only because friendship was truly its basis. Friendship was a secret to its power and the code name that protected its members. SACO was headed by 2 men after Pearl Harbor. One was the American, then a commander, Rear Admiral Milton Miles, who was fondly referred to as Mary by his men. The other was the director of the program, General Dai Li. He was head of the Chinese Secret Service. These 2 men themselves had a special relationship built on trust. SACO was the only operation in World War II to have a policy of total immersion. The 2,900 or so Army, Marine, and mostly Navy sailors lived, led, trained, and fought alongside tens of thousands of Chinese nationalist troops in China, behind enemy lines, and hundreds of miles from supplies. They were incredibly brave and resourceful. Because they often operated behind enemy lines, the American SACO soldiers were assigned an unseen Chinese protector to make sure nothing happened to them. They depended on one another for survival. There were meteorologists, frogmen, underwater demolition teams, radio intelligence, and search and rescue personnel working with and training the Chinese. The Americans became adept at disguise, and guided by the Chinese, could slip back and forth through enemy lines at will. They learned how to walk properly, taking little steps, grew their hairline, wore peasant clothing, no uniforms. They wore straw hats and sandals while balancing a long shoulder pole with a radio in the front basket and a machine gun in the back basket. Walking miles with their Chinese shadow protectors, they would pass multiple Chinese or Japanese checkpoints along the way. During the months and years, not one was detected. Eventually, 97,000 intelligence guerrillas and 20,000 saboteurs and pirates were trained. Approximately 71,000 Japanese military personnel died during their mission, while there were only 5 or fewer Americans that either died or were killed. They became known as the SACO Tigers, and the outfit was nicknamed the Rice Paddy Navy. Their motto, "What the hell?" My dad was one of those guys. He was underage when he enlisted and signed up for hazardous duty like the rest of them. After the war, the Chinese anti-communist nationalists relocated to the island of Formosa, now Taiwan. Project Friendly was finally declassified, and the activities and contributions of SACO remained little known here in the United States. But these men and their deeds continue to be remembered, studied, and honored in Taiwan. There's even a museum in Taipei dedicated to their memory. The Taiwanese Military Intelligence Bureau has joined us during annual reunions for almost 70 years. Our relationship stands as a shining example of all that is good and right in a chaotic world, and truly embodies perpetually the original spirit of Project Friendship. The stated mission of those original veterans and their families, sons and daughters, nieces and nephews, and now grandchildren and great-grandchildren, is to pass on to posterity our knowledge of SACO and to educate the public in what SACO did to help win a victory in World War II. Our bylaws also stress that the members of the SACO Corporation, by our own actions and by our heritage, know that liberty has not, is not, or ever will be free, and will, by our actions, encourage and demonstrate pride in our country and its armed forces and for the preservation of liberty in the United States and the world. It is notable that James Honeycutt, an original vet and father of our SACO vice president, was ordered to enter Shanghai in 1945 to establish radio communication in preparation for a U.S. invasion. Once set up, they received communication that the war had ended, whereupon they went next door to the German embassy and confiscated the 5 remaining Nazi flags, one of which was donated to the SACO Museum in Taipei. Members representing this museum grace us with their presence here today. It is our pleasure and honor to bequeath a copy of the SACO plaque at Mount Soledad to them for their museum. In closing, thank you for providing this opportunity. It means so much to the memory of those who served so well. Please stand with me now, silently, with your hand over your heart, for a moment of reflection and respect during the playing of taps. You may be seated. Our next speaker graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy and flew the Air Force's A-10A Warthog and other attack aircraft during his 30-year military career. He was an A-10 wing commander and squadron commander and commanded Afghanistan's largest base and Iraq's second largest Air Force base in the global war on terrorism. After 4 combat tours and 80 A-10 combat missions, he is now a military historian and author. Please welcome Colonel Gregory Marston.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you so much for the, first of all, for the invitation to talk to this group. And I do want to apologize in case some of the things I'm going to say you've heard before, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the overall history of SACO. This is a plaque dedications in honor of SACO, a secret Navy organization that served in the CBI, or China-Burma Indo Theater, in World War II. SACO, as you know, is the abbreviation for the Sino-American Cooperative Organization, was the most important unit working in China during this monumental conflict. This inauguration also honors the nationalist Chinese, now based in Taiwan, one of America's great allies in World War II. The nationalist Chinese contributed greatly to the Allied costs, but at an immense price to her people before and during the war. It is little known today, except outside this group, but in July 1937, 4 years before Pearl Harbor, the Japanese army invaded China and quickly captured its capital, Peking, which is now Beijing. This was the beginning of the Second Sino-Japanese War, in which China fought Japan alone. The Japanese had 3 operating principles in China: burn all, kill all, loot all. This was a military invasion and a genocidal campaign against the Chinese people. For the first year, the Japanese military, with overwhelming air power, won victory after victory, conquering vast tracts of eastern China and every seaport. The Chinese national government and military retreated into the rugged and mountainous areas of western China and then built the famous Burma Road, a land route from Burma to western China. This land supply from the west kept China in the war and allowed it to launch a guerrilla campaign against Japan. Their guerrilla campaign worked and kept over 70% of Japan's army fighting in China. For over 8 years, 1937 to 45, Japan couldn't win in China, nor could they leave. After the Japanese attacked the U.S. Navy fleet in Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, China became a critical ally to America, Britain, and the Soviet Union against the Axis power, which is Germany, Italy, and Japan, our opponents in World War II. Unfortunately, supplying China became extremely difficult when Japan cut the Burma Road in April 1942. The only supply route to China was via American cargo aircraft flying over the Himalaya Mountains, a treacherous route that severely limited our aid. That was called flying the hump. SACO was formed on April 15, 1943, when U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt and Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek, leader of the Chinese nationalists, signed an agreement for each nation to help each other to win the war against Japan. As you've heard, SACO had over 2,900 personnel, mostly Navy sailors, but from every service stationed in China near the then capital of Chongqing. They were nicknamed the SACO Tigers or the Rice Paddy Navy. SACO personnel lived and worked with the Republic of Chinese military forces for the entire length of the war. Their main objective was to assist the Chinese in defeating the huge numbers of Japanese soldiers which occupied large portions of their country. SACO made the most of this teeny logistical stream via air into China. Their main objective was to organize, train, and equip the Chinese military and to provide weather and intelligence reports from across China, including occupied areas. SACO greatly improved the Nationalist Chinese Army, training and organizing over 115,000 Chinese guerrillas, pirates, and saboteurs. By the end of the war, these Chinese forces had killed tens of thousands of Japanese soldiers and destroyed hundreds of bridges, locomotives, ships. Despite a lack of resources and with limited manpower, SACO pulled far above its weight by helping the Nationalist Chinese military and keeping China in the war. SACO also gathered and sent thousands of critical weather and intelligence reports, which greatly helped the Pacific Theater. They did great things through inspired leadership, hard work, innovation, and working closely with the Chinese nationalist military and her people. The next honorees for this memorial are the Republic of Chinese military forces and the Chinese people themselves. China tied up and sapped the energy of most of Japan's army from 1937 until the end of the war. China also helped the CBI theater by sending 2 armies to Burma to help stop the Japanese invasion into India in 1944. Due to this help from China, the United States had time to grow its military and convert its colossal industrial power towards a war footing. America built a military with over 11 million personnel, along with gigantic armadas of ships, aircraft, tanks, bombers, and eventually atomic weapons. The U.S. was the main Allied fighting force in the Pacific and fought numerous bloody battles there. However, if Japan had been able to redeploy millions of their soldiers bogged down in China to the Pacific Theater, it would have greatly impacted the U.S. campaign there, costing tens of thousands of additional Americans killed and wounded. Finally, we must thank and honor the Chinese people for their enormous sacrifices before and during World War II. For instance, local Chinese villagers helped rescue and return to America almost all the famous Doolittle raiders in April 1942, but at the cost of an estimated 250,000 Chinese civilians killed by Japan for this assistance. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese laborers hand-built the Burma Road and many of the U.S. Army Air Corps airfields used to bomb Japan. China suffered enormously, with over 14 million dead due to combat, starvation, disease, Japanese terror bombings, atrocities, and even biological warfare. Over 100 million Chinese were also displaced as refugees from their homes and villages. Furthermore, much of China itself was destroyed in the war. It is impossible to comprehend the terrors and depredations that they so bravely faced by the Chinese people during these years. Today, we honor SACO, the Republic of Chinese Military Forces now based in Taiwan, and the Chinese people for their immeasurable contribution in World War II. World War II ended sooner and with far fewer losses for America because the nationalist Chinese were our allies in the war, but at enormous cost to themselves and their nation. Thank you.
I am now pleased to introduce Captain Todd Perry as our next speaker. He retired in May after 40 years of active duty naval service as a Navy SEAL. Todd is now serving as the executive director of the Navy SEAL Experience, a long-awaited project to build a U.S. Navy SEAL interactive museum in San Diego, where all our Navy SEALs are currently trained. It is home to over a dozen SEAL, SEAL boat, and SEAL support commands. Thank you, Captain Perry. We welcome you.
Thank you, Lynn. Hey, there's too many to thank here, but I'm going to have to hit a couple real big here. Obviously, Neil for running the Mount Soledad, and for Lynn and Dan for the SACO. I tell you, our SACO vets that came here, you guys are my heroes. I can't stress that enough. And then really our Taiwanese delegation. I mean, that's a long flight, so thank you for coming out here. This is it's incredible. So I got to admit, I've always been a pretty big history buff, and kind of thought I knew my history, especially military history and naval special warfare history. But it wasn't until my 39th year of being in the Navy that I heard about SACO, and that was from a SEAL veteran named Ben Milligan, who wrote a book, By Water Beneath the Walls, and he had an entire chapter on it. It was fascinating, and after reading that, I wanted more. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn more about SACO. I wanted to learn more about some of the legends on our side. Phil Bucklew and Doug and Halpern, Buck Halpern, I'm sorry. Ironically, both of them played in the NFL, and after Pearl Harbor, they said we got to fight for a better cause. So a couple of heroes in our history that I had to read about, and then I found this really interesting article. It was in a World War II magazine just a few years ago, and the name of the article was called "How Naked World War II Sailors Ended Up Riding Mongolian Ponies in the Gobi Desert to shoot bazookas at the Japanese." I don't know if anybody else read that. About 5 pages. I highly recommend all the above. Milligan's book and that article were fascinating. And I really recommend you read those if you want to know more about it. But because they're such an important part of our Sino-American history that we should never forget. And some of this has kind of already been covered. I'm sorry, so I'm going to hit it a little more briefly. But the initial mission for SACO, this was tasked right by the CNO, Ernest King. And what the Navy needed was weather stations. Because in the Navy, weather's pretty important. In military history, I mean, we can go back to the Spanish Armada back in 1588. They were destined to take the United Kingdom over. Wasn't called that back then, obviously, but weather got involved. So very important for the Navy, not just for operations at sea, but obviously any invasion you're going to do. And the stations that we had weather stations in the Philippines and the Gilbert Islands, and we lost those to the Japanese. So that was the initial mission. We need weather data. But there were secondary missions of that as well. And that was radio intercepts, communications, collect intel. And then the mission just kept expanding, and that's what happens in wartime. So it went from intelligence and communications collection to targeting. Rescuing of the downed aviators that we just heard about from Greg, including the Doolittle raid. And ultimately to train an indigenous force to fight the Japanese. And then it expanded more to go out and advise, what we call today, advise and assist those forces, go with those forces. So, in the military, this is what we call unconventional warfare. UW is what we all call it that lived in the acronym world, right? And this is UW on a massive scale. And most of us also just knew it as guerrilla warfare. But it's the partnership with indigenous forces. It's so important. So, not just the ones I mentioned already, but there was also the preparation for an invasion, preparation of the invasion site, scouting landing areas. They were looking at Fuzhou province. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, I apologize, but that's pretty much northwest of Taiwan on the Chinese coast. And again, as Greg mentioned, in April of 43, those first camps were formed. Ultimately, 2,500 men of the Rice Paddy Navy showed up there, and that expanded over time. I'll get into that a little bit more in remarks tonight. I'm trying to be brief tonight, right now. But so again, the training starts off as weather, then it starts involving, communications, intel, reconnaissance, weapons, demolition, sabotage, and ultimately again, the stats I have, I'm sure that I saw a lot of different stats, but ultimately 50,000 Chinese peasants were trained as indigenous forces. I mean, those are amazing numbers. And upon graduation, guess what they got? A weapon, right? And the leadership was unique, very unique to the U.S. Mill. And again, that was covered with General Tai Li. But the deputy, and again, he was a commander at the time. I mean, Miles retired as a vice admiral. He was a commander, right? Now, I must admit, General Li promoted him to vice admiral in the Chinese, or vice general, right? A 3-star general. But this was a commander, which is just mind-boggling. We think about that today with how the military is ran. And he reported directly to the CNO, which is also unheard of. And he quickly realized he had a very immense task, a huge responsibility. He needed a lot of help. He had sailors that were there. They're doing their communications work and others. And he had some great Marines to give him the tactical experience that they absolutely needed. But he needed more. So what he went to is we have the Scouts and Raiders, and their main tasks had already been done. The Scouts and Raiders with our naval combat demolition units are what supported all the Allied invasions in Europe. So some of these key Scouts and Raiders I talked about, Bucklew and Halpern, etc., these are the guys that helped support the landings in Morocco, and then over in Sicily, and then over in Italy, such as Anzio. Then they came around and hit Normandy, and then some of them came back and down and supported the invasion of southern France. So by April 43, again, some of them are still supporting that, but by the time the Scouts and Raiders got pulled in, they were looking for something else to do. And they said, we got a place for you to go in China. And that's where they went. And again, it was true unconventional warfare, true UW. I mean, you talk about the total immersion, learning the customs, learning how to insult, your hosts. It was a huge task. And they did this not just in China, but it was required in India and Burma as well, because that's how they came in through those roads through India and Burma. It's kind of like when you read about Lawrence of Arabia in World War I. It's kind of the same thing, except in that case, T.E. Lawrence was working with the Arabs to fight the Ottoman Empire. But this was kind of the same thing that was going on, but on a far larger scale. But it's funny, they had some of the same challenges. You read about, T.E. Lawrence and you read about Miles. They had questionable support from their governments, right? What are we doing over there? We had a lot of ignorance about our partners. That hasn't changed. We saw that in Afghanistan and Iraq, unfortunately. And there was just a lot of infighting, a lot of turf wars going on. And, Miles had to deal with that with the Army, with Vinegar Joe Stilwell, who ran the China, Burma, India theater. He definitely had to deal with the State Department, and most importantly, had to deal with it with the OSS and Donovan, right? And despite all of those challenges, right, despite that enemy from within, the SACO results were pretty impressive. The BDA was covered, but again, 27,000 guerrillas, or 27,000 enemy killed by our forces. And if you look at about 50,000, that's a 2.51 kill ratio. I mean, that's incredible. That means for every 5 Chinese that we trained, they took 2 Japanese soldiers off the battlefield. That's a huge effect. And then there's the tangible, the 158 bridges, the 66 train derailments, the 35 to 141 ships. So I'm sure they're counting junks. I don't know, but the numbers are staggering, right? But I'll tell you what's equally impressive as a former SEAL, right, is just that legacy of SACO has continued into naval special warfare today. As World War II ended, so did SACO. Our Scouts and Raiders went away. Our naval combat demolitions went away. The only thing the Navy kept out of it was our underwater demolition team, our frogmen, who were the ones primarily working in the Pacific. Some of the Scouts and Raiders had already been embedded with those frogmen, but that's the only thing that remained after World War II was our frogmen. And we always taught, because many of the SEALs here like Lance, that our amphibian evolution, coming out of the water and doing stuff, was in Korea when we kind of started growing legs and going ashore and blowing up bridges and tunnels. But it didn't. It started in 1943 in China. And it's something I wasn't aware of in 39 years, I wasn't even tracking this. So we continued to morph. And SEAL Teams 1 and 2 were commissioned by President Kennedy in 1962. So now it's really on. Ironically, you know, when they wanted how are we going to fight in Vietnam, they went to Phil Bucklew. His report, the Bucklew report, became the definitive counterinsurgency. Now his was more focused on the maritime environment, which was why all of our SEALs were down in the Delta regions. But you know, this is stuff that carried on from SACO, right? And it's interesting, it was the same. At first in Vietnam, it was train, then it became advise and assist, and it was go out and do direct action yourself. And then, you know, the goal of this is always put yourself out of a job. You train them, they get up so we can come home. We did the same in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it evolved back to that, you know, in Vietnam by 72, it was just guys going out, you know, trying to do advise and assist again as we were trying to come home. So we continued evolving in Naval Special Warfare. In 1983, those remaining underwater demolition teams became SEAL teams. Underwater UDT-11, well, on the other side of the Point Loma there, UDT-11 became SEAL Team 5, and others became SEAL delivery vehicles, but we morphed, and that's in our SEAL teams came up. You know, it's ironic, our training center where all these SEALs are created is called the Phil Bucklew Center. We changed that name about 15 years ago. You know, again, original SACO leader. And we continue doing the same thing, like I said, in Iraq and Afghanistan. Not as successful in Afghanistan as we painfully saw a year ago, but in Iraq, I'd say it was. Ultimately we went back a second time with ISIS and defeated it. It was the same format. We were training the Iraqis, eventually doing advise and assist, and now we've pulled away, and you guys got it. We're going home. We don't need to lose more Americans over here. But so, you know, a lot of legacies continued. So, in answer to that opening question on that article, right? Again, how naked World War II sailors ended up riding Mongolian ponies in the Gobi Desert to shoot bazookas at the Japanese. I'll tell you why, right? It's for the same reason we had naked warriors armed with only a knife and fins swim up on the beaches throughout the Pacific. This was our UDT supporting the amphibious landings, supporting the Marines. You know, on that, initially it was just like when we started supporting the landings, it was like Kwajalein, it was coral reefs and atolls right after Tarawa. But as we got closer to Japan, it turned more into like Normandy. In other words, very heavily fortified beaches that our guys had to deal with. Started in Guam, Okinawa, and it continued. And I'd say it's also for the same reason that we had Navy sailors conduct thousands of missions in Afghanistan and ultimately kill Osama bin Laden right across the border. I'd say it's for the same reason that of the 70 International Space Station commanders, 2 of them have been Navy SEALs. The very first one that went up was Bill Shepard in 2000, and Chris Cassidy, who we all know, he went up and ran Expedition 63 just a few years ago. So it wasn't necessarily special tactics and equipment that led to the success. It was a breed of very special men, a common man with an uncommon desire to succeed, men with mental and physical toughness and courage, men who could adapt quickly in challenging environments, men with resiliency and endurance, who understood the value of teamwork and especially partner relationships. So in closing, while this mission remained classified for many decades, we now have a lasting memorial to the service of the brave men who supported this effort. And that's American and Chinese, Taiwan, that supported that efforts. And like I said earlier, likely the largest of its kind in U.S. military history. This monument provides us with a U.S. memorial on Mount Soledad to complement the SACO Museum in Taipei, which, by the way, is now on my bucket list. And SACO will soon be memorialized further here in San Diego with a Navy SEAL Museum. So thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Duncan Hunter Sr., who represented San Diego as a U.S. Congressman from 1981 until 2009 and served as the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee from 2002 until 2006. During the Vietnam War, Duncan held the rank of first lieutenant, participating in 24 helicopter assaults, and was awarded the Bronze Star and Air Medal. Please welcome Duncan Hunter Sr.
You know, I don't know whether to wear this hat. My wife said you got to wear it for the sun, like a lot of other guys. But maybe I'll keep it off here. Thank you so much, Lynn. But ladies and gentlemen, I've spoken at a lot of events. I've never heard such a great historic summation of a group than we've just heard from Colonel Marston and Captain Perry. Let's thank them for this picture they just painted of SACO, because it's not just a history of a group, it's a history of two countries. And what I thought I would do, having listened to that great recital of what SACO is and what it did for our country, let me just go to the present and the future and what we're facing, and what the descendants and the forces of Chiang Kai-shek, men and women, are facing, who still live on an island called Taiwan. Today, and I think that goes very effectively with the message that I always get coming to Mount Soledad, because the message from these thousands of men and women who are on these walls, and from all of those at the national cemeteries across America, places like Rosecrans and the Miramar Annex, and Arlington Cemetery, and the Normandy Cemetery, and thousands of others in small unmarked graves across the world where American forces projected our power. The message is, be strong and be ready, and try to prevent war wherever you can, while continuing to follow the American interest. The American interest is always to help those who want to keep their freedom or who seek freedom. And that's being manifested in the help that we're giving Ukraine right now, as those villages are being reduced to rubble by Russian cannon fire. So let me go to Taiwan and to the present situation and what Taiwan needs to do to survive and to defend its freedom. First, Taiwan needs to spend more money on national defense, and they need to strengthen their defense apparatus. And if you look at the matchup between Communist China and Taiwan, it appears to be very one-sided. More than 10-to-1 in personnel, a massively lopsided equation with respect to sea power, air power, missile power. So what does Taiwan have to do? Taiwan has to be able to have the ability, and this is to deter war, to keep from having an invasion, to keep from having a war. They have to have the ability to take a hit and to survive that hit, and to be able to come back with their own measures, with their own offense. They have to be able to do that. First thing you got to do in a battle or a war is to survive the hit from the enemy and be able to throw your rock back. And that's been the case ever since the ancient cannon battles, whether it was at sea or on land, where you try to silence the other guy's artillery to win the battle. That means you've got to have him be able to shoot his artillery, and you're able to continue to shoot to knock his out and ultimately to prevail. So what does Taiwan have to do? Taiwan has got to have survivable systems. They have to be able to take hits from missiles, whether they're shipborne missiles or land-borne missiles, land-launched missiles, whether they're longer-range ballistic missiles or shorter-range ballistic missiles coming from across the Taiwan Straits. Now, what does that mean? That means that you have to have survivability, which means they have to be mobile. So Taiwan needs to acquire mobile platforms that will allow them to survive a strike and be able to shoot back. And when they shoot back, to be able to target very accurately with smart weapons. That means when you want to knock out a bridge, instead of bombing the bridge with 100 bombs, you throw one smart bomb, one joint direct attack munition or JDAM, but one smart bomb at one post in that bridge, and you knock the entire bridge down. That's called the era of smart weapons. And that is the most effective leverage tool that we have in the U.S. arsenal today, smart weapons, and that Taiwan has available to it in their arsenal. And they have some, but they've got to be able to have survivable platforms. That means systems that can move. So if they take incoming rocket fire or missile fire, they're able to survive that because they have mobile platforms that can move around, just like the mobile platforms that we have sent to the Ukrainians, called the so-called HIMARS, high mobility systems. They're on wheels. They're like a big tank on wheels, but they've got rocket systems. So they can shoot their rockets and then they can move very quickly. That's called shoot and scoot. That means getting out of dodge before the other guy can shoot back at you. Taiwan has to have those systems in large number. They have to have anti-missile systems, the ability to shoot down incoming missiles. They need to acquire more of those. They have to have the ability to target ships, whether they're targeting those ships from their own ships, which are a very small force right now, or from the land. So Taiwan has a lot of work to do, and I think my message is just the same message that every one of these men and women on these walls would give you, which is stay strong. Stay strong, stay alert, and the United States has a great interest in preserving freedom and in bringing freedom to countries around the world who seek it strongly themselves. And obviously, as our earlier speakers mentioned, you don't win them all. Afghanistan was a lesson in lots of money expended, lots of brave men and some women expended in that long war without a good result. In fact, I think that the captured equipment, the billions of dollars worth of equipment, would make a convoy from here to Los Angeles and hundreds of miles north of Los Angeles. We lost billions of dollars of American platforms. We don't always win. We don't always prevail, and we can't do everything, but we help where we can. And right now we have a practical mission in front of us. That practical mission is for Taiwan to be strong enough to resist an invasion. And that means that you got to spend money. And that means also that you need to use that great product of freedom. And that product of freedom is called technology. As Winston Churchill once said, and I'm paraphrasing him, he said it's so good and such a blessing that the free world, that free men are able to produce technology that protects us against very large forces. And of course, he was talking about the technologies that we developed in World War II. So Taiwan must focus on that technology and focus on spending money and spending a lot of energy developing a force that is strong enough that they can deter an attack. That's the issue of the day. And you know, remembering wars is always about the future. And a lot of what you just heard on this great history that our two military leaders just gave us of SACO, a lot of those lessons, the idea that we're able to leverage resources and train people and disperse some technology, but also to teach people operations so that they could undertake them themselves. It's a great lesson there for the future. Right now, Taiwan must grab this opportunity, this breathing space that they have, to strengthen up, to use technology smartly, to leverage their capability and their great economic power, because Taiwan right now has great economic power. a lot of that has to be transformed into the ability to defend themselves. So that's my message, my brief commercial, and thanks so much. And yeah, I was a very mediocre Army guy in Vietnam. I think that my great inspiration for that was probably a 1.7 grade average at the University of California. But I enjoyed the Army a lot more. So thank you for letting me be in this very honored spot today. And I remember when I came into Congress, 1980, January morning, and I got up there late because I had work to do back here, and I ran out on the Capitol steps, and Ronald Reagan was giving his inaugural address, and he gave a great address, one of the greatest speeches I've ever heard. And when he ended, he told about a man from another war, World War I. And that man's name was Martin Treptow. And he said Martin Treptow was a guy that had a barber shop in Chicago when World War I started. So he left his barber shop and he joined the Rainbow Division in France, got over there after a brief training, and after he'd been there about 3 weeks, he was killed. When Martin Treptow's buddies found his body, they found that he had written a little diary. And the last words of the diary said, "I must fight this war as if the success or failure of my country depends on me alone." And I thought about that charge that Ronald Reagan gave all of us in 1980 to go out and help our country as if the success of our country depended on us, each of us alone. And as I reflected on these great SACO men and what they did behind enemy lines for so long and with such great effectiveness, I have to think that you came closer than almost any of us to meeting that charge and that obligation that Martin Treptow laid out in that simple diary in World War I. Thank you for letting me be with you. God bless you.
So we're ready to move to the next part of the ceremony. And on the agenda are two guests who will be delivering proclamations and recognitions of personal achievement. First up will be Samantha Keosoukanh, a Wounded Warrior Fellow and Military Field Representative for Congressman Scott Peters. Keo previously served 4 years in active duty in the U.S. Marine Corps. Keo?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Congressman Scott Peters and the constituents of the 52nd District, I am proud to present a proclamation to the Sino-American Cooperative Organization. Whereas on Thursday, August 18, 2022, celebrates the SACO inauguration to honor and recognize the first American military unit to ever serve under a foreign leader during time of war, and became established as a highly secret guerrilla intelligence group who served behind enemy lines while providing tactical, operational, and humanitarian reconnaissance. And whereas the SACO made up of Navy, Marine, and Coast Guard service members and their Chinese shadow protectors were main contributors to the liberation of mainland China from Japan, with only having one SACO Tiger killed in action while serving under a joint command established by U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Republic of China Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek. And whereas on the 9th of June 1942, during an early morning raid, the unit was placed under the joint command of General Tai Lai and American Rear Admiral Milton Edward Mary Miles, where the group graciously became known as the Rice Paddy Navy, and the men were giving the names SACO Tigers. And whereas despite language and cultural barriers, the SACO Tigers, along with the Chinese protectors, persevered by training and relying on each other for survival, that grew into a strong brotherhood and earned them the military code name as Project Friendship. And now, therefore, be it resolved that on this day, the 18th of August, the SACO will be commemorated on behalf of the constituents of the 52nd Congressional District of the state of California. Thank you, and Semper Fi.
I'm honored to accept this proclamation on behalf of SACO. Thank you so much.
Next up is Lori Brown, who represents Senator Brian W. Jones of the California 38th District, where she serves as the Director of Constituent Affairs for over 14 years. She's here to recognize Ken Brown, Walt Travis, and Bernard Derripple on behalf of Senator Jones.
Thank you so much. It is an honor and pleasure to be here on behalf of State Senator Brian Jones. And thank you so much for the history lesson. It is unbelievable. And just what a gift to be here. And what an honor. And I just want to present this proclamation to Kenneth U. Brown in special recognition of your unyielding commitment to protecting and defending freedom. Through your unwavering courage to our republic, and as a radio man first class and SACO veteran, we honor your service and courage and most of all of your sacrifices. Thank you. Next is for Walt Travis, in special recognition of your unyielding commitment to protecting and defending freedom through your unwavering courage to our republic as a U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant. We honor your service and courage and most of all your sacrifices. Thank you. Now, how do you? Mr. Bernard Derripple, thank you for your outstanding community service. In special recognition of your unyielding commitment to protecting and defending freedom through your unwavering courage to our republic, and as a radio first-class man and SACO veteran, thank you. We honor your service and courage for all your sacrifices.
That'll be for Lynn over here.
Oh, that's right.
It was suggested to me that the best military ceremonies bring history forward to the present day. Thus, I found it serendipitous that the SACO plaque, marked over there by the flowers, is mounted just below 2 plaques honoring 13 military personnel killed in the Kabul airport bombing in Afghanistan just a year ago. So I ask that we take a few moments of silence in honor of their service and sacrifice. How many of you knew that during World War II, the term shell shock was replaced by terms like battle fatigue and combat stress reaction when describing post-traumatic stress syndrome? PTSD typically impacts those that are in close proximity to the front lines for long periods under very stressful situations, and we can only imagine what the SACO veterans may have experienced. Amazingly, it took until 1980 until PTSD was formally recognized as a disorder. Our next speaker is Piero Berlonghi from the Canine Companions Southwest Training Center in Oceanside, California. He'll be accompanied by a number of service dogs being prepared for advanced training by their handlers.
Thank you, Dan. I'm Piero Berlonghi, Senior Development Director at Canine Companions. And you may be wondering, what is the connection between SACO and Canine Companions? The connection is one Canine Companions dog named Bella. Bella was the mascot of SACO for 8 years. Whenever a Canine Companions dog is matched with a person, wonderful things happen. And magic happened when Dr. Jerry Levendowski met Bella, a Canine Companion dog he adopted. Bella became the mascot of SACO. Together, Dr. Levendowski and Bella provided comfort to veterans in hospitals and assisted living homes, and together they participated in many SACO conventions and veterans events. We are honored to be here today at Mount Soledad to be a part of this beautiful ceremony. Canine Companions is the nation's leading service dog organization. Since 1975, we have provided service dogs to adults, children, and veterans with disabilities entirely free of charge. There have been more than 7,000 Canine Companions teams nationwide since 1975. We breed our dogs in Santa Rosa, California. After 8 weeks, our puppies are transported to volunteers in all 6 regions around the country. These volunteers are called puppy raisers, and we have 2 of them here today. Liz Connors is here with her puppy Omika, and Lori Dunn is here with puppy Sonic. Bella was one of these puppies years ago. For 18 months, our puppy raisers will work with these future service dogs When the dogs are close to 2 years old, they will come to a training facility in Oceanside to be matched with a person with a disability. Today, I'd also like to acknowledge Lance Corporal Lance Weir, here with his service dog, Cash. Lance is a veteran who has received 3 service dogs from Canine Companions. In 2007, he joined our staff and created a program designed to recruit more veterans. The Veterans Initiative has steadily grown, and in 2018, after a 2-year study with the VA, we implemented the PTSD program, a specialized training for Canine Companions dogs to assist veterans with PTSD. Altogether, Dr. Levendowski and Lance and these puppy raisers and Canine Companion service dogs are empowering veterans to regain physical independence, pride, and hope. Beyond much needed physical assistance, the love, loyalty, and positivity of a canine partner can make a profound, lasting impact on someone dealing with difficult emotions that are hard to communicate. To all the veterans here today, we thank you for your service. We at Canine Companions pledge to continue to provide, free of charge, expertly trained service dogs that can enhance the lives of veterans and those with PTSD. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dr. Jerry. Thank you, Lance. And thank you, puppy raisers. And a special thank you to Bella. Our dogs are trained to bark on command. And now Sonia would like to say thank you. Okay. Thank you. There you go.
Lori?
So amazing, all these amazing people in one place. Lance, we would like to recognize you in your outstanding community service and special recognition of your unyielding commitment to our community through serving our nation. Thank you for your service to the veterans and their families across the nation and through your tireless work at the Canine Companions Veterans Initiative. Thank you so much for all that you do for everyone. You're making a difference. Congressman, we're going to go over there and present it to him.
Okay.
The final segment of this celebration today will be a presentation of gifts. And Lynn, will you join me up here, please? First, Todd Perry will be joining us. We'll be providing him a donation to the Navy SEAL experience here in San Diego. And we'd also like to present this shadow box it has all of the patches representing SACO, the medals that they would have been awarded, and most interestingly is the SACO medal. This was first issued in 1976 after the SACO mission was declassified, and there's only been about 600 of them that have been issued. So it's very special. That's it.
Hey, thank you so much for this. And you know, this medal's hard to find right here. I mean, this is a really big deal. And, you know, we have a museum out in Fort Pierce, Florida, if any of you are ever out there, Navy SEAL Museum. And that's where this is going to have to go initially as we work our project to put one here in San Diego. But this will proudly be displayed in San Diego, and hopefully next time you come around here, we've got this up on display. But thank you very much.
I'll take a photo if we get over here. Yeah. Thank you. This is really nice. Thank you very much. Next up, Duncan Hunter. We so very appreciate you coming out on such short notice, and I can't tell you the number of speakers that I tried to come to bring all of the history and bring it to present day.
I know, I was number 31 on the list.
And if it hadn't been for Senator Jones, you wouldn't be here. So we should be thanking them as well.
And well, listen, thanks, and thanks to Brian Jones for extending this invitation. Really appreciate that. But just thanks to all the SACO, to the tradition that SACO provided for our country, and for all nations around the world that would be free. It's a real honor to be here. Thank you very much.
So we have a fracture here. And this is a replica, if you would, of the shadow box.
Oh my gosh, fantastic.
You'd be honored to,
oh, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Take a photo with us?
I want to take a photo right here with this gentleman,
Okay.
with both
All
these
right,
gentlemen.
There you go. Yeah, he's a showman. He's a showman.
Oh, yeah, he really is.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I will. I will. God bless. Thank you. Thank you from all the war
And you got his donation. Next up is Piero Berlonghi. Please join us. And SACO wishes to make a donation to the Canine Companions PTSD program, and we'll be also providing Europe fracture that I hope will hang at the Southwest Regional Training Facility in Oceanside, California. If you'd like to, yeah, I think that's their smart move.
Who do we have next?
Neil.
Neil.
So, Mount Soledad.
And one of these, I have no
I don't either. Thank you, Piero. And finally, we wish to thank our wonderful host, Neil O'Connell, and the staff, Becky, and so many others that helped put this together for us. Neil, if you come up, we're going to be making a donation to the expansion of the monument here. Okay. She's coming. She's coming. She heard you.
Okay. Okay. Great.
Right here. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Our pleasure.
Come on, Becky. You did all the work.
Thank you so much.
I'll let you, once you go into the middle there and hold that.
We'll get one with the guys in a minute. Hold the envelope or not.
Spark the order, huh?
All right. Thank you. I'm going to come down here with these words.
the
Come on,
guys
Becky. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a few more photo ops, there's a few more gifts that we'll be presenting after the ceremony. For all of you that are going to be on the bus, we're running 15 minutes late, so the bus will be coming around in 15 minutes. We'll pile on right away and head out to Cabrillo National Monument. Now Lynn has some closing remarks.
My sunglasses help me keep my hair out of my eyes. Let's see. All right. In conclusion, on behalf of the SACO, thank you all for your generosity in contributing to and sharing this experience with us. I would also like to take this opportunity to commend all the veterans here today for their beautiful service. It's my wish that SACO history has become a little more interesting and personal to you today, and that you've managed to find a warm spot in your heart for the Taiwanese people. Lastly, Dan Levendowski needs to be applauded for the passion and vision that he has directed to this project. Thank you, Dan. It's awesome. Okay. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Let me remind you that we will need to board the bus shortly, but there will be photo opportunities by the wreath and the plaque immediately following. And I'd just like to have God bless you all. Thank you for being here today.